Elliot Kensington, billionaire tech mogul, thought he had it all. A thriving empire, a picture-perfect wedding, and a life of power and prestige. But when Claire Harper, his small-town ex, arrives at the altar with 3 identical boys bearing his smile, everything changes. What unfolds isn't just the unraveling of secrets or the collapse of old ambitions. It's a heartwarming journey of redemption, fatherhood, and the discovery that true wealth lies in love, not fortune. Elliot's path to becoming the dad he never had is filled with laughter, lessons, and pancakes. Will he rise to the challenge and find his happily ever after? Not in boardrooms, but in bedtime stories and treehouses. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Elliot Kensington stood in front of the floor-length mirror in his penthouse apartment, adjusting his custom-made tie. Everything in his life was perfect, just the way he'd always wanted it. At 40 years old, he had it all. A billion-dollar tech company, a magnificent home overlooking Central Park, and a beautiful socialite fiancée who would soon become Mrs. Kensington. "Sir, the wedding planner is on line 1, his assistant called from the doorway. "She needs final approval on the champagne fountain. Tell her whatever Vanessa wants she gets," Elliot said, not bothering to turn around. Money was no object for this wedding. It had to be the social event of the year. Everyone who was anyone would be there. The guest list sat on his desk, and his eyes kept going back to one name he'd added last night, after too many glasses of scotch. Claire Harper, his ex-girlfriend from 5 years ago, the only woman who'd ever told him no. She was probably still teaching kindergarten in that small town in Connecticut, living her simple life. The thought made him smirk. "Are you sure about inviting her?" James, his best friend and best man, had asked when Elliot told him about the invitation. "It seems a bit cruel." "It's perfect," Elliot had insisted. "She'll see exactly what she gave up, the life she could have had if she'd just understood my ambition." Now 3 weeks before the wedding, Elliot sat at his desk in his corner office looking out at the Manhattan skyline. His secretary brought in the day's mail, and there it was, Claire's RSVP card. His heart actually skipped a beat when he saw her neat handwriting. "Yes, I'll attend," it read simply. And below that, "plus 3 guests." Elliot laughed. So she was bringing backup, probably her sister and parents, to help her get through the awkwardness. That would make his triumph even sweeter. That evening, at dinner with Vanessa at Le Bernardin, his fiancée was going over the final details of their wedding. She looked stunning in her designer dress, her diamond engagement ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. "Darling, are you listening?" Vanessa's voice cut through his thoughts. "I was saying the flowers for the church alone cost $40,000. Isn't it wonderful? Everyone will be talking about this wedding for years." "Of course, sweetheart," Elliot replied, reaching for his wine glass. "Whatever makes you happy." Later that night, alone in his study, Elliot found himself Googling Claire's name. There wasn't much, just a few mentions in the local paper about school events. No social media presence, no way to see what she looked like now, how her life had turned out. But it didn't matter. Soon, he'd see her face when she walked into his wedding and realized what she'd lost. The weeks flew by in a blur of final preparations. Vanessa was constantly rushing from one appointment to another. Final dress fittings, meetings with the caterer, interviews with society magazines about their upcoming nuptials. "Did you see the latest article?" she asked, showing him her phone. "They're calling us New York's power couple of the year." Elliot nodded, but his mind wandered to the last time he'd seen Claire. It was a rainy night in Connecticut, and she'd been crying. "I won't move to New York," she'd said. "I won't give up teaching just to be arm candy at your business events. If you loved me, you wouldn't ask me to." He'd walked away that night, convinced she was being selfish, unable to see the bigger picture. Now, 5 years later, he was worth billions, and his wedding would be in every major publication. The day before the wedding, Elliot stood in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, watching the army of workers setting up for tomorrow's event. 500 guests would fill this room, dining on $1,000 plates and drinking champagne that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Mr. Kensington?" The wedding coordinator approached him. "We have the final guest count. 498 confirmed attendees, including Claire Harper, plus 3. Elliot smiled to himself. In less than 24 hours, he would have everything he'd ever wanted. The perfect wife, the perfect wedding, and the perfect revenge on the one woman who dared to reject him. That night at the rehearsal dinner, Vanessa sparkled in a white designer dress, chatting with their guests about their upcoming honeymoon in the Maldives. Elliot watched her work the room, the very picture of sophistication and success. "You okay?" James asked, coming to stand beside him. "You seem distracted." "Just thinking about tomorrow," Elliot replied, and it wasn't entirely a lie. He was thinking about tomorrow, but not about Vanessa walking down the aisle. He was thinking about the look on Claire's face when she saw everything she could have. Back in his penthouse that night, Elliot couldn't sleep. He stood at his window looking out at the city lights, feeling like a king surveying his kingdom. Tomorrow would be perfect. Everything would be perfect. If only he knew how wrong he was. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear over Manhattan. In the bridal suite of the Plaza Hotel, dozens of workers rushed around, preparing for the social event of the year. Elliot stood by the window, already dressed in his tuxedo, watching the guests arrive in their luxury cars. "The photographers from Vogue are here," his assistant announced. "They want some shots of you getting ready." Elliot nodded, turning to face the cameras with his practiced smile. This was exactly what he'd worked so hard for, to be important enough that even getting dressed for his wedding was newsworthy. "Mr. Kensington," the wedding coordinator called from the doorway, "the guests are starting to arrive. Would you like to greet them?" He made his way to the grand entrance hall, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. Each time the door opened, his eyes darted to see who was entering. Where was Claire? Had she lost her nerve? Then he heard it, the sound of children laughing. That was odd. This was supposed to be an adults-only wedding. He turned toward the sound, and his whole world stopped. Claire Harper stood in the doorway, more beautiful than he remembered in a simple blue dress. But it wasn't her appearance that made his heart stop. It was the three little boys holding her hands. Three identical faces with his dark hair, his green eyes and his dimpled smile. "Hello, Elliot," Claire said calmly. "It's been a while." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the three boys, then at Elliot, then back at the boys. The resemblance was undeniable. "What?" Elliot couldn't form words. His legs felt weak. "What is this?" "These are your sons," Claire said, her voice steady. "Liam, Lucas, and Leo. Boys, say hello to your father." The triplets looked up at him with curious eyes. "Hi," they said in perfect unison, and Elliot felt the room spin. "Mr. Kensington?" The wedding coordinator appeared at his side. "Is everything all right? Mrs. Bradford is asking about you. She's waiting in the bridal suite with the photographers." Vanessa, his fiancée, the wedding, everything was falling apart. "Claire," he managed to say, "we need to talk now." He led her and the boys to a private room off the main hall, his mind racing. The boys immediately found a bowl of mints on the coffee table and began counting them, dividing them equally among themselves. "They're 4.5, Claire said, before he could ask. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you left. I tried to contact you, but you'd changed your numbers. Your office said you didn't take calls from—" what was the phrase? "Unknown persons." Elliot watched the boys, his sons playing with the mints. They were so organized, so methodical, just like him. "Why didn't you try harder?" he demanded. "These are my children." "Are they?" Claire's voice was sharp. "You made it very clear that night that your career was the only thing that mattered. To you. I decided my boys deserved better than a father who saw them as an inconvenience." Before Elliot could respond, the door burst open. Vanessa stood there in her wedding gown, her face white with fury. "What is going on?" she demanded. "Everyone's talking about 3 little boys who look exactly like you. Who is this woman?" The triplets looked up at Vanessa's loud voice, instinctively moving closer to their mother. Elliot saw fear in their eyes and something inside him broke. "Vanessa," he said, "I need you to calm down." "Calm down?" she shrieked. "On my wedding day I find out you have 3 secret children? Was this your plan?" She turned to Claire. "Did you plan this to ruin my perfect day?" "No one's trying to ruin anything," Claire said calmly. "The boys just wanted to meet their father. We'll leave if that's what you want." "No!" The word burst from Elliot before he could stop it. The thought of watching his sons walk away was suddenly unbearable. "What did you say?" Vanessa's voice was deadly quiet. "I said no," Elliot repeated, stronger this time. "They're my children, Vanessa. I need to talk to them, to Claire." "Fine," Vanessa spat. "Talk to them, but understand this. If you're not at that altar in 20 minutes, ready to marry me and forget this ever happened, don't bother coming at all." She stormed out, leaving a heavy silence behind her. The boys had stopped playing with the mints and were watching the adults with worried expressions. "Mom?" One of them, Lucas, Elliot thought, spoke up. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart," Claire assured him. "Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. Elliot looked at his watch. 20 minutes. He had 20 minutes to make the biggest decision of his life. "Claire," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need to know everything. About them. About you. About the last 5 years." "You don't have time," she reminded him. "Your bride is waiting." Elliot looked at the 3 little boys who had his eyes, his smile, his features. They were examining the room now, pointing out patterns in the wallpaper, working together to count the flowers in the vases. They were brilliant. They were beautiful. They were his. "Maybe," he said slowly, "she'll have to keep waiting." Outside the private room, the sounds of 500 guests waiting for a wedding grew louder. Inside, Elliot couldn't take his eyes off his sons, who were now drawing pictures with crayons Claire had pulled from her purse. "They always carry crayons," Claire explained, following his gaze. "They love to draw buildings, especially Leo. He's already designing his own houses." "Just like I used to," Elliot said softly, remembering the architectural sketches that had filled his childhood notebooks. A sharp knock on the door made them all jump. James, Elliot's best man, poked his head in. "Elliot, Vanessa's father is looking for you. He's not happy." "Tell them I need more time," Elliot said, not looking away from the boys. After James left, Claire sighed. "You should go. This isn't fair to Vanessa." "Not fair?" Elliot's voice rose. "What about what's fair to me? You kept my children's secret for 5 years." The boys looked up at his raised voice. Claire motioned for them to keep drawing, then turned back to Elliot. "Let me tell you about Fair," she said quietly. "Fair was living alone in my tiny apartment, throwing up every morning while trying to teach 20 kindergartners. Fair was working 2 jobs during my pregnancy. Because I couldn't afford to take time off, Fair was having no one to hold my hand during the emergency C-section when the doctors realized it was triplets." Elliot felt each word like a punch to the gut. "Your sister was in Afghanistan with the army. My parents had just retired to Florida. I was alone, Elliot, completely alone." One of the boys, Liam, came over and tugged on Claire's sleeve. "Mom, can we show him our report cards?" Claire reached into her bag and pulled out 3 slightly crumpled papers. Elliot took them with trembling hands. "All A's, every single one." "They're in the gifted program," Claire said proudly. "The school wanted to move them up a grade, but I thought it was better for them to stay with kids their own age." That's exactly what my mother did for me," Elliot said, his voice thick. "I know. I remembered you telling me about it. I've tried so hard to make the right decisions for them. Every choice, every sacrifice has been for them." Another knock at the door. This time it was the wedding coordinator, looking frantic. "Mr. Kensington, please. Mrs. Bradford is threatening to call everything off if you don't come now." Elliot waved her away, then turned back to Claire. "How did you do it? Raise them alone?" "1 day at a time," Claire said. "I moved to a smaller apartment, took extra tutoring jobs. My neighbors helped watch them when I worked nights at the diner. It wasn't the life you would have wanted." "What do you mean?" "That night, when you left, you said you couldn't be tied down to some small-town life, that you were meant for bigger things, remember?" Elliot remembered. He'd been so sure of himself, so certain that his dreams of wealth and power were worth any sacrifice. "Mom," this time it was Lucas, "can we show him our science project, the one that won first place?" Claire pulled out a tablet and showed Elliot a video of the boys presenting their project on renewable energy. They were brilliant, articulate, passionate, just like him at that age, before money and status became his only goals. "They're amazing," he whispered. "They are, and they've asked about you. As they got older, they noticed other kids had dads. I never said anything bad about you. I just told them their daddy had a different path in life." The door burst open again. This time it was Vanessa herself, still in her wedding gown. "Enough!" she shouted. "Elliot, this is ridiculous. These children can't possibly be yours. She's obviously after your money." The triplets huddled together, scared by her anger. Elliot saw Leo's lower lip trembling and something snapped inside him. "Don't you dare upset my sons," he said, his voice cold. "Claire, does anyone else know about the boys?" "Just my sister and parents." "Why?" "Because the press is going to have a field day with this and we need to protect them." He turned to Vanessa. "I'm sorry, but there won't be a wedding today." Vanessa's face turned red. "You can't be serious." You're choosing them over me, over everything we've built. Built? Elliot laughed bitterly. We built a perfect image, Vanessa, that's all. These boys, they're real. They're my flesh and blood, and I've already missed too much. Vanessa ripped off her veil and threw it at him. You'll regret this. My father will pull out of the merger. You'll lose millions. I don't care, Elliot said, and was surprised to realize he meant it. After Vanessa stormed out, Claire looked at him uncertainly. Elliot, I didn't come here to ruin your wedding. We can work out some kind of arrangement. No, he said firmly. No more arrangements. No more missing out on their lives. He knelt down to the boys' level. Would you guys like to get some ice cream? I'd really like to get to know you. The triplets looked at their mother questioningly. Claire hesitated, then nodded. Ice cream sounds good, she said softly. But Elliot, there are 500 people out there waiting for a wedding. Elliot stood up, squared his shoulders, and took out his phone. James, get in here. I need you to make an announcement and call my PR team. Things are about to get interesting. As James entered the room, the boys went back to their drawings. Elliot watched them work together, sharing crayons and ideas, supporting each other the way he'd always wished he'd had brothers to support him. One more thing, he said to James. Call my realtor. I need to look at houses in Connecticut. The Piety Plaza Hotel erupted in chaos when James announced the wedding was cancelled. Reporters who had come to cover New York's society event of the year suddenly found themselves with a much bigger story. The billionaire groom had discovered he had secret triplets. Get my car around back, Elliot told his security team, and make sure no one takes pictures of the boys. Claire was helping the triplets pack up their crayons when Vanessa's father, Richard Bradford, burst into the room. You've lost your mind, he shouted at Elliot. Do you have any idea what this will do to our stock prices? The merger paperwork is already being processed. Then unprocess it, Elliot said calmly, watching as Leo grabbed his brother's hands, protecting them. The sight made his heart ache. Family comes first. Family? Richard sneered. You've known these kids for an hour. Which is exactly why. I can't waste another minute, Elliot replied. He turned to Claire. There's a back entrance. Let me take you all somewhere quiet where we can talk. Claire looked uncertain. The boys have school tomorrow. Please, Elliot said softly, just give me today. Before Claire could answer, Elliot's phone exploded with notifications. Someone had leaked the story to the press. Headlines were already appearing. Billionaire's secret love children crash society wedding. Mom? Lucas asked, looking worried. Why are people taking pictures through the windows? Elliot immediately moved to block the boys from view. My penthouse has security. We'll be safe there, away from all this. Your penthouse? Claire shook her head. Elliot, we can't just step into your world. The boys have their routines, their friends. Then let me step into yours, he said quickly. I meant what I said about looking at houses in Connecticut. I can run the company from anywhere. James interrupted them. Elliot, Vanessa's giving interviews in the lobby. She's telling them Claire planned this, that it's all a scheme to get money. Elliot saw the hurt flash across Claire's face. I need to fix this, he said. Let me protect you and the boys, please. Claire looked at her sons, who were watching the adults with worried expressions. Okay, she finally said. But just for today, we'll hear what you have to say. The escape from the plaza felt like something out of a movie. Security guards formed a barrier around them as they rushed through service corridors. The boys, excited by the adventure, giggled as Elliot's driver helped them into the back of a luxury SUV with tinted windows. Your car is fancy, Liam observed as they pulled away from the hotel. Too fancy, Claire muttered, looking uncomfortable in the leather seats. Elliot watched in the rearview mirror as his sons pressed their faces against the windows, pointing out tall buildings and construction sites. They were so curious, so full of life. How had he lived so long without knowing them? At the penthouse, the boy's eyes went wide at the floor-to-ceiling windows and the view of Central Park. Can we draw the buildings? Leo asked excitedly. Of course, Elliot said, eager to please. I have some proper drawing paper in my office. While the boys settled in with their art supplies, Claire stood awkwardly in the massive living room. I never wanted your money, she said suddenly. You have to believe that. I do, Elliot replied. You could have asked for child support at any time, filed a paternity suit, gone to the press, but you didn't. I just wanted them to be happy. Normal kids, not tabloid stories. Elliot's phone rang, his company's board of directors demanding an emergency meeting. He declined the call. They're going to take sides, you know, he said. Vanessa's family, my investors, the press. Some will believe you're after money. Others will think I abandoned you deliberately. Isn't that what you did? Claire asked, quietly. I didn't know about them, Elliot insisted. But yes, I abandoned you. I was so focused on becoming this, he gestured at the luxury around them, that I forgot what really matters. A squeal of laughter from his office interrupted them. They found the boys had discovered his old drafting table and were taking turns spinning on the architect's chair. Be careful, Claire called out automatically. It's okay, Elliot said, watching them play. I used to do the same thing in my father's office. He paused, before he lost everything gambling and left us. Claire's expression softened. You never told me that. I never told anyone. It's why I worked so hard to be rich, to be respected. I thought if I had enough money, enough power, I could never be hurt like that again. And now I look at them and realize I almost made the same mistake my father did, choosing something else over the people who matter most. His phone buzzed again, this time with news alerts. Photos of the boys were already online. The story was spreading. We need to get ahead of this, he said. Let me call my lawyers, set up a proper custody arrangement. I'll buy a house near you, spend every free moment with them. I want to be their father, Claire. A real father. It's not that simple, Claire protested. You can't just walk into their lives and take over. They need stability, routine. Then teach me, Elliot said desperately. Teach me how to be part of their world instead of trying to drag you into mine. Before Claire could respond, Lucas came running in. Mom, Dad, look what... We drew. It was the first time any of them had called him Dad. Elliot felt tears in his eyes as Lucas proudly held up a drawing of a house. It's where we all can live, Lucas explained. See? Room for everyone. Claire and Elliot exchanged looks over their son's head, the simple wisdom of children, seeing a solution where adults saw only complications. It's perfect, Elliot said softly, meaning so much more than just the drawing. Outside, reporters were gathering on the street. Below. Inside, 3 little boys were redesigning their father's office, unaware that their simple presence had already redesigned his heart. The life Elliot had carefully built was crumbling around him. His wedding was ruined, his business deals were in jeopardy, and tomorrow's headlines would be brutal. And yet, watching his sons play together, hearing them call him Dad, he knew he'd never made a better decision in his life. By Monday morning, the story was everywhere. Elliot sat in his home office, watching the morning news shows dissect every detail of the wedding that wasn't. Vanessa had already appeared on 3 programs, painting herself as the victim of a cruel setup. She trapped him, Vanessa cried on National Morning Today. She waited until our wedding day to spring these children on him. What kind of mother does that to her kids? The boys were back in Connecticut with Claire, getting ready for school. Elliot had wanted them to stay longer, but Claire was firm they needed their normal routine. He checked his phone again, hoping to see a message from her. Sir? His assistant appeared at the door. The board is demanding an emergency meeting, and Mr. Bradford is threatening to sue for breach of contract over the merger. Let him, Elliot said, his eyes fixed on a photo Claire had let him take of the boys. I have more important things to worry about. Just then, his phone rang. It was Claire. The press found us, she said, her voice tight with worry. They're outside the school. The boys are scared. Elliot was on his feet immediately. I'm on my way. Don't let them talk to anyone. He raced to his car, ignoring the reporters camped outside his building. During the drive to Connecticut, his lawyer called with updates. Vanessa's family is out for blood, the lawyer warned. They're claiming you knew about the children all along, that this was a deliberate attempt to sabotage the merger. And they're not the only ones. Your company's stock has dropped 15% since Friday. I don't care about the stock, Elliot snapped. Find a way to keep my son's names out of the press. They're innocent in all this. When he arrived at the elementary school, the scene was chaos. Reporters lined the street, cameras flashing. He found Claire in the principal's office with the boys, who lit up when they saw him. Dad, they called out in unison, and despite everything, his heart soared at the word. We're going to fix this, he promised Claire. Then he turned to the principal. I'm moving them to private school, somewhere with better security. No, Claire protested. Elliot, you can't just make these decisions. This is their school. Their friends are here. Their friends' parents are giving interviews about us, Elliot shot back. I saw 3 of them on TV this morning. The boys watched this exchange with worried faces. Leo, always the most sensitive, started to cry. I don't want to leave, Ms. Peterson's class, he sobbed. We're doing the space project next week. Elliot and Claire exchanged guilty looks. They were already failing at co-parenting, letting their own drama upset the kids. "Okay," Elliot said softly, kneeling beside Leo. "No one's leaving their school, but how about we set up some security to keep those noisy people with cameras away?" Claire nodded gratefully. "That sounds reasonable." Just then, Elliot's phone buzzed. His face darkened as he read the message. "What is it?" Claire asked. "Vanessa's father. He's calling a press conference. Says he has proof this was all a setup." "What proof could he have?" Claire demanded. "There is no setup." Before Elliot could respond, his sister Rebecca burst into the office. He hadn't seen her in months. She'd refused to attend his wedding, saying Vanessa was wrong for him. "I came as soon as I saw the news," Rebecca said, then stopped short at the sight of the boys. "Oh my God, they look just like you did at that age." The triplets stared at their newfound aunt with curiosity. "Are you our daddy's sister?" Liam asked. "Yes, I am," Rebecca smiled, then turned to Claire. "I'm so sorry about all this, but I have to say, I always hoped he'd find you again." "You knew about her?" Elliot asked, surprised. "Of course I knew. Claire was the only woman you ever loved who loved you back for yourself, not your money." Rebecca paused. "That's why I have to tell you, Vanessa's been planning something. I overheard her on the phone last night with her father. They're going to claim Claire tried to blackmail you before the wedding." Claire gasped. "That's a lie." "Of course it is," Elliot said grimly. "But they're desperate. The merger would have made them millions." The principal cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should focus on getting the children home safely?" Right on cue, Lucas tugged on Claire's sleeve. "Mom, can Dad come home with us? He can help us with our math homework. He's good at numbers, right?" The innocent question hung in the air. Coming home with them meant stepping into their world, their small apartment, their simple routines, their real life. "Please," Leo added, "we can show him our robot collection." Elliot looked at Claire, trying to convey how much this meant to him. She sighed, then nodded. "Okay, but we do things our way, Elliot. No fancy cars, no security teams, just normal family time." "Normal family time," Elliot repeated, as if testing out the words. "I'd like that." Rebecca watched this exchange with tears in her eyes. "Mum would have loved them so much," she said softly. The mention of their mother, who had died 2 years ago, hit Elliot hard. She never got to meet her grandsons. He'd wasted so much time chasing the wrong dreams. "We need to go out the back," Claire said, gathering the boys' backpacks. Away from the reporters, as they walked to Claire's modest SUV, the boys chattering excitedly about showing their father their home, Elliot made a silent promise. He would fix this mess. He would protect them all. And most importantly, he would never again let pride or ambition cost him the love of his real family. But first, he had some math homework to help with. Somehow, that seemed like the most important their task in the world. Claire's apartment was on the second floor of a modest building in a quiet neighborhood. Elliot followed the family up the narrow stairs, watching as the boys raced ahead, backpacks bouncing. "It's not what you're used to," Claire said apologetically as she unlocked the door. Elliot stepped into a warm, cluttered living room filled with children's artwork and family photos. 3 small desks were lined up against one wall, each decorated with the boys' names. A basket of Legos sat in the corner next to a bookshelf stuffed with children's books. "This is..." Elliot's voice caught in his throat. "This is perfect. Dad, come see our room." The boys pulled him down a short hallway to their bedroom. 3 twin beds, each with different colored space-themed quilts, were arranged like spokes of a wheel. The walls were covered in their drawings, mostly buildings and bridges. "They're going to be architects," Claire said from the doorway, "just like you wanted to be before I decided making money was more important," Elliot finished. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Can we show him the project now?" Lucas asked eagerly. Claire checked her watch. "Homework first, then project. That's the rule." To Elliot's surprise, none of the boys protested. They simply went to their desks in the living room and pulled out their books. "They're very disciplined," he said softly to Claire. "They have to be. Single income, single parent, we survive on routines." Elliot watched as she moved efficiently around the small kitchen, starting dinner while checking homework problems. This was real parenting, not the fantasy version he'd imagined where money solved everything. His phone buzzed. Another message from the board. He silenced it. "Dad?" Leo called. "Can you help me with this math problem?" For the next hour, Elliot sat with his sons, helping with multiplication tables and spelling words. He learned that Liam loved science. Lucas was a history buff, and Leo could already do complex spatial puzzles in his head. They get that from you, Claire said, as she stirred something that smelled delicious. Their teachers say they're all gifted in different ways. The peaceful moment was interrupted by a breaking news alert on Claire's small TV. Vanessa's father was at his press conference. "We have evidence," Richard Bradford was saying, "that Ms. Harper attempted to extort money from Mr. Kensington weeks before the wedding. When he refused, she planned this public spectacle to force his hand." "That's not true," Claire exclaimed. "We know," Elliot said firmly, turning off the TV. "No one who matters will believe him." But Claire looked worried. "What if they try to take the boys? Rich people can hire fancy lawyer—" "Stop," Elliot moved to her side. "They're my sons. I'll sign any custody papers you want. No one is taking them from you." The boys, sensing the tension, had gone quiet at their desks. "Mom?" Liam asked in a small voice. "Are we having family dinner?" The simple question brought tears to Claire's eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Your dad's staying for dinner. And can he read us our bedtime story?" Lucas added hopefully. Elliot looked at Claire questioningly. She nodded. "I'd love to read your bedtime story," he said. During dinner, a simple but delicious pasta that the boys helped serve, Elliot learned about their daily lives. They took karate lessons on Tuesdays, had a science club on Thursdays, and went to the library every Saturday morning. "And Sunday is pancake day," Leo informed him seriously. "Mom makes the best pancakes." "Maybe," Claire said carefully. "Your dad would like to come for pancakes sometime?" The boys' faces lit up. "Yes, Dad, please come for pancakes." Elliot felt his heart might burst. "I wouldn't miss it." After dinner, the boys finally got to show him their project, a working model of a suspension bridge they'd built for the science fair. Elliot was amazed by their understanding of basic engineering principles. "We won first place," Liam said proudly. "Even beat the fifth graders." "Of course you did," Elliot said. "You're brilliant, all of you." Bedtime involved a well-choreographed routine of baths, pajamas, and teeth brushing. Elliot watched in awe as Claire managed all three boys with practiced ease. Finally, they were settled in their beds, and Elliot sat in the reading chair between them. They'd chosen Bridge to Terabithia and were already several chapters in. "You'll have to catch up on the story," Leo told him seriously. As Elliot read, the boys gradually drifted off to sleep. He found himself watching them instead of the book, their peaceful faces, their steady breathing. How had he lived so long without knowing this kind of love? In the living room, Claire was grading papers from her class. "They have a big math test tomorrow," she said. "They've been studying all week." "They're amazing, Claire. You're amazing. The way you've raised them." She looked up at him. "I had no choice. They needed me to be strong." Elliot's phone buzzed again. This time it was his lawyer. "Bradford's press conference has created some issues," the message read. "Need to meet first thing tomorrow. Custody. Could get complicated." Looking at the phone, then at the peaceful apartment around him, Elliot made a decision. "Claire, I want to buy you a house. Something with a yard, better security. Somewhere the boys can be safe from all this media circus." "Elliot, not because I'm trying to control things," he added quickly, "but because they deserve to be protected from my mistakes, from the chaos I've brought into their lives." Before Claire could respond, they heard small footsteps. Leo stood in the hallway, clutching his stuffed giraffe. "I had a bad dream," he said. "Can Dad tuck me in again?" Claire and Elliot exchanged looks. Tomorrow they would have to deal with lawyers and reporters and vengeful ex-fiancés. But tonight there was just this, a little boy needing his father. "Of course I can tuck you in," Elliot said, taking his son's hand. "I'm not going anywhere." The next morning hit like a tornado. Elliot woke up on Claire's couch to the sound of his phone ringing and the smell of breakfast cooking. "The Bradford family has filed for an emergency injunction," his lawyer said without preamble. "They're claiming you're mentally unstable and unfit to run the company." In the kitchen, the boys were eating cereal while Claire packed their lunches. The scene was so normal, so peaceful. It made the lawyer's words seem like they were from another world. "Dad, are you coming to our math test today?" Lucas asked, hopefully. "Mom says parents can watch through the classroom window." Before Elliot could answer, his sister Rebecca called. "Turn on the TV," she said urgently. "Vanessa's doing another interview. It's bad, Elliot." Claire grabbed the remote. And there was Vanessa, perfectly made up despite her tears. "I'm worried about him," she was saying. "To throw away everything for a woman he hasn't seen in 5 years. These children, has anyone even done a DNA test? I just want to help him see that he's being manipulated." "That's it," Elliot growled, reaching for his phone. But Claire stopped him. "The boys need to get to school," she said firmly. Your drama can wait. The drive to school was tense. Reporters had found Claire's apartment building overnight, and camera flashes greeted them as they left. The boys huddled close to their parents, scared by all the shouting and cameras. "Just keep walking," Claire coached them. "Remember what we practiced? Don't look at them, don't talk to them." At the school, Elliot's security team had already set up a perimeter, keeping the media at bay. But the damage was done. Other parents stared and whispered as they walked by. "Ignore them," Claire told the boys, straightening their backpacks. "Focus on your test today, make me proud." "And me," Elliot added, kneeling to their level. "I know you'll do great." After the boys were safely inside, Claire turned to him. "This has to stop, Elliot. They can't live like this. I know my lawyer's working on a gag order against the Bradfords, and I'm calling a press conference this afternoon to tell our side." "Our side?" Claire looked skeptical. "Since when are we a we?" "Since I realized what really matters. Claire, let me help fix this. Let me be part of their lives. Really part of it." Before she could respond, Elliot's assistant appeared, looking panicked. "Sir, the board has called an emergency vote to suspend you as CEO. Mr. Bradford is claiming you've become emotionally compromised and are making irrational decisions." "He's right about one thing," Elliot said, watching through the school window as his sons settled into their classroom. "I am emotional about this. They're my children." "Elliot," Claire said softly, "you can't lose your company. The boys would never forgive themselves if the company doesn't matter." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't that simple. His company employed thousands of people with families of their own. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was James. "Bradford's daughter is here," his friend reported. "She's crying. To anyone who'll listen about how you had a mental breakdown at the wedding. She's saying Claire planned everything, that she's been stalking you for years." Elliot felt his blood boil. "That's ridiculous. Claire's never asked me for anything." "Actually," Claire interrupted, "I am going to ask you for something." She took a deep breath. "Fight back, not just for us, but for them. Show our boys what it means to stand up for what's right." Elliot stared at her, seeing again the strength that had first made him fall in love with her years ago. "Mr. Kensington," the school principal approached them. "The boys are asking if you're staying to watch their test." Through the window, Elliot could see his sons looking anxiously at the door. They were counting on him, just like they'd been counting on their mother for the past 5 years. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, his assistant reminded him. "The vote can wait," Elliot finished. "My sons need me." He spent the next hour watching through the classroom window as the boys took their math test. They were focused, confident, occasionally glancing up to smile at their parents. This, he realized, was what success really looked like. After the test, during recess, his lawyer called again. "Bradford's playing hardball. He's threatening to reveal some questionable deals from your early days. Says if you don't step down quietly, he'll make sure you lose everything." Elliot watched his sons playing on the swings, their laughter carrying across the playground. "Tell Bradford I'll see him at the board meeting, and tell him to remember something. A man protecting his family is a lot more dangerous than a man protecting his money." Claire touched his arm. "What are you going to do?" "First, I'm going to watch our boys finish their school day. Then I'm going to go remind everyone why I built this company in the first place." He smiled grimly. "And then, if you'll let me, I'd like to take you and the boys house hunting, somewhere with a big yard and good security." "Elliot, I know, no controlling everything, but Claire, look at them. They deserve to be safe, to have space to grow, to have both parents in their lives." A commotion at the school gates interrupted them. Vanessa had arrived with a camera crew, demanding to speak to Claire. "Time to choose sides," Elliot said quietly. "Are you with me on this?" Claire watched as security blocked Vanessa from entering the school grounds. In the playground, their sons played on, unaware of the storm gathering around them. "I'm with them," she said finally. "Whatever keeps them safe and happy, whatever gives them the father they deserve." Elliot nodded, understanding completely. "Then let's go deal with the vultures together." As they walked toward the growing crowd of reporters, Elliot felt Claire's hand slip into his. It wasn't romantic, it was something deeper. They were parents, united in protecting their children, and heaven help anyone who tried to hurt their family. The Kensington Technologies boardroom was filled with tension as Elliot walked in. 12 board members sat around the massive table, with Richard Bradford at the far end, looking smug. Vanessa sat beside her father, her eyes red from crying or pretending to cry. "Nice of you to finally join us," Bradford sneered. "Done playing house?" Actually, I was watching my sons take a math test, Elliot replied calmly, taking his seat. They got perfect scores, by the way. They're brilliant, just like their mother. Their mother, Vanessa spat, is nothing but a gold-digging... Careful, Elliot cut her off, his voice cold. That's the mother of my children you're talking about. James, who sat on the board, cleared his throat. We're here to discuss the company's leadership, not personal matters. Personal matters? Bradford stood up, waving a stack of papers. This man abandoned his own wedding, crashed our stock price, and endangered a merger worth billions, all because some small-town teacher showed up with kids claiming they're his. They are his, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Rebecca walking in carrying a folder. And I can prove it. This is a closed board meeting, Bradford protested. I'm a Kensington shareholder, Rebecca reminded him. And I have something the board needs to see. She started distributing papers to each board member. 5 years ago, when Claire discovered she was pregnant, she did try to contact Elliot through his office. I was working as his assistant then. Elliot stared at his sister. What are you saying? I found these in Vanessa's private emails, Rebecca continued. She intercepted Claire's messages. She knew about the pregnancy before she even started dating you, Elliot. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Vanessa's face went white. You're lying, she shrieked. The timestamps and email headers don't lie, Rebecca said. You saw an opportunity. A wealthy man with a pregnant ex-girlfriend who didn't know he was about to be a father. You made sure he never found out. Elliot felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Is this true? Of course it's not true. Bradford thundered. This is ridiculous. We're here to discuss your fitness to lead this company. No, said Margaret Chen, the longest-serving board member. I think we're here to discuss something much more serious. If these emails are authentic, this goes beyond personal matters. This is fraud. Vanessa burst into tears. Daddy, do something. But Bradford's face had gone pale as he read through the emails. Vanessa, tell me you didn't. I did it for us, Vanessa cried. He was perfect, rich, handsome, ambitious. I wasn't going to let some nobody schoolteacher ruin everything. Elliot stood up slowly. You knew. For 5 years you knew I had children. You watched me talk about wanting a family someday, about my dreams of having sons to mentor, and you knew, because you would have run back to her, Vanessa screamed. One look at her precious babies, and you would have forgotten all about becoming something greater. Greater, Elliot laughed bitterly. I missed the first steps, the first words, the first everything of 3 amazing little boys because you wanted to be Mrs. Elliot Kensington. The merger, Bradford said weakly. All our plans are over, Margaret Chen announced. I move for an immediate vote, not on Mr. Kensington's leadership, but on whether to pursue legal action against the Bradfords for their attempted manipulation of this company's CEO. One by one, the board members nodded their agreement. Vanessa collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Elliot, Bradford tried one last time. Be reasonable. Think about the money you'll lose. I've already lost 5 years with my children, Elliot said quietly. There's no amount of money worth another minute away from them. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire with a photo of the boys' math tests, each marked with a perfect score. Looking at their identical proud grins, Elliot felt a clarity he'd never known before. I built this company from nothing, he told the board. Not for money or power, but because I wanted to create something meaningful, something I could be proud of. He looked at the photo again. Now I have 3 more reasons to make sure this company stays strong and ethical. The press is going to have a field day with this, James warned. Let them. I'm done hiding. My sons deserve to see their father stand up for what's right. Vanessa and her father were escorted out of the building by security. As they left, Vanessa turned back one last time. I really did love you, she said. No, Elliot replied. You loved what I could give you. Claire loved me enough to raise our children alone, rather than force me into fatherhood before I was ready. After the Bradfords were gone, the board quickly voted to retain Elliot as CEO and to begin an investigation into Vanessa's actions. But Elliot was barely listening. He was too busy texting Claire. It's over, he wrote. The truth came out. Can I take you and the boys to dinner to celebrate? Claire's response came quickly. The boys have karate class until 6, but after that, yes, they'd love that, we all would. Looking around the boardroom at the empire he'd built, Elliot realized none of it meant anything compared to that simple family dinner waiting for him. One more thing, he texted Claire. I want to show you a house I found. It's right by the boys' school with a huge backyard and room for everyone, including me, if you'll let me be close by." As he waited for her response, Elliot knew that whatever came next would be better than any life he'd planned before, because this time he had his priorities straight. His phone buzzed one last time. Claire had sent another photo, the boys in their karate uniforms grinning at the camera. "We'll look at the house," she wrote, "but remember, one step at a time. One step at a time, just like his sons were learning in their karate class." Elliot smiled, finally understanding that the best things in life couldn't be rushed or bought. They had to be earned, one precious moment at a time. The house Elliot had found was a beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch, just 3 blocks from the boys' school. As the real estate agent led them through the rooms, the triplets ran ahead, their excited voices echoing through the empty spaces. "Look, Mom," Leo called from upstairs. "There's a room perfect for our drawings. And a huge backyard," Lucas added, pressing his face against a window. "We could build a treehouse," Liam suggested, looking hopefully at his father. Claire watched her son's excitement with a mixture of joy and concern. "Elliot, this is too much. It's too big, too expensive." "Nothing's too much for them," Elliot said softly. "Besides, the guest house out back would be perfect for me. Close. Enough to be part of their lives, but not pushing too fast." After the revelations about Vanessa's deception had hit the press, public opinion had shifted dramatically. The story of a mother raising triplets alone while the father was kept in the dark resonated with people. Now, instead of scandal, the papers were calling it a love story. "Dad!" The boys rushed back downstairs. "Can we see the guest house? Can we help you decorate it?" "Actually," Claire said carefully, "that's something we need to talk about. How would you feel about your dad living nearby? Not in our house, but close enough to see you every day." The boys exchanged looks. They always seemed to have entire conversations without speaking, then broke into identical grins. "Yes!" they cheered in unison. Later that evening, after the real estate agent had left, the family sat on the porch steps sharing a pizza. The late summer sun cast long shadows across what might soon be their yard. "I want to do this right," Elliot said, as he watched the boys drawing up plans for their dream treehouse. "No rushing, no pushing, just being here, being their father." Claire nodded. "They need that, they need you." She paused. "I got a call from a publisher today. They want me to write a book about raising the triplets alone." "That's amazing." Elliot started to reach for her hand, then stopped himself. They weren't there yet. Maybe they never would be, and that was okay. "Mom, Dad," Liam called out, "we finished the treehouse plans." The boys proudly displayed their drawing, a detailed blueprint that showed real architectural promise. They'd even included measurements and a materials list. "Look," Leo pointed to a section of the drawing, "this part connects our house to Dad's guest house, so we can visit any time." Elliot felt tears in his eyes. Trust children to find the simplest solutions to adult problems. Just then, his phone rang. It was his lawyer. "The Bradfords want to settle," the lawyer reported. "They're offering to drop everything in exchange for no criminal charges against Vanessa." Elliot looked at his family, because that's what they were now, unconventional as it might be, and made a decision. "Tell them yes," he said, "but with one condition. They have to make a public statement admitting what they did. My sons deserve to know their father didn't abandon them willingly." After he hung up, Claire gave him a questioning look. "I'm done fighting," he explained. "The boys don't need to see any more drama. They just need their parents to get along and give them a stable life." "Speaking of stable life," Claire said, "parent-teacher conferences are next week. Their teacher wants to meet you." Elliot's face lit up. "Really? Really? She says the boys can't stop talking about their dad. Apparently they've been telling everyone you're going to help them build the best science fair project ever." "No pressure," Elliot laughed. The boys had moved to the yard now, measuring spaces for their future treehouse. They worked together seamlessly, Liam calculating distances, Lucas taking notes, and Leo sketching the landscape. "They're amazing," Elliot said softly. "How did you do it? Raise them so perfectly on your own?" "One day at a time," Claire replied. "Just like we're going to do now, together but separate, both loving them in our own ways." A car drove by slowly, and they tensed, expecting photographers. But it was just a neighbor, waving friendly. "The media circus is dying down," Claire observed. "Good. The boys deserve a normal life." Elliot watched as his sons debated the best location for a rope ladder. "You know, I always thought success meant having the biggest house, the most expensive car, the perfect society wife. And now? Now I know it's this. being here, watching them grow, getting to be their father. He smiled. Even if it means living in a guest house and building tree houses instead of skyscrapers. Dad, Lucas called out, can we get started on the tree house this weekend? Don't you have your science club on Saturday? Claire reminded them. After science club? Leo suggested hopefully. Elliot looked at Claire, who nodded. After science club, he agreed. And maybe we can get ice cream on the way home. The boys cheered, then went back to their planning. They worked until the sun set, their heads bent together over their drawings, occasionally looking up to smile at their parents. As darkness fell, Claire stood up. Time to head home, boys. School tomorrow. But Mom, they protested in unison, we're not finished with the plans. The plans will wait, she said firmly. Say goodbye to your dad. The boys ran to hug Elliot, almost knocking him over with their enthusiasm. See you tomorrow, Dad? Liam asked. Tomorrow and every day after, Elliot promised. As he watched Claire drive away with their sons, Elliot stood in what would soon be his yard, looking at the house that would soon be their home. Not his and Claire's, that chapter was still uncertain, but his and his sons. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire. They want you to read their bedtime story over FaceTime. Same chapter as last night. Elliot smiled, already heading to his car to get his copy of the book. This, he realized, was what happily ever after really meant. Not grand gestures and fairy tale weddings, but simple moments of love strung together day by day, building something real and lasting. One treehouse at a time. 3 months had passed since the wedding that never was. The leaves were turning golden in the backyard of the colonial house that was now home to the most unusual family in town. Claire and the boys lived in the main house, while Elliot had made the guest house his own, complete with a desk where he could work from home 3 days a week. Dad, Lucas called from the nearly finished treehouse. We need your help with the roof. Elliot climbed up the sturdy ladder they'd built together. Every weekend for the past months, he and the boys had worked on their project, learning about architecture, physics, and teamwork along the way. Looking good up here, he said, examining their work. Your mum's going to love the reading nook you designed. The boys beamed with pride. They'd insisted on adding a special space where Claire could read to them, just like she'd done every night of their lives. Down below, Claire was grading papers on the porch swing. These peaceful Saturday afternoons had become their new normal. No more reporters, no more scandal, just family time. The Bradford settlement papers came through, Elliot told Claire later while the boys were cleaning up their tools. Vanessa's public statement will be released on Monday. Claire nodded. How do you feel about that? Honestly, I'm just glad it's over. The boys deserve to have the whole story out there, but after that, he shrugged. It's time to move forward. The doorbell rang, and Rebecca arrived with bags of Chinese food, their traditional Saturday dinner. The boys rushed to hug their aunt, who had become a constant presence in their lives. Guess what? She announced as they set the table. Your dad's company just won the contract to build the new Children's Science Museum. Really? The boys bounced with excitement. Can we help design it? Actually, Elliot said, I was thinking of bringing in some expert consultants, 3 young architects who have a unique perspective on what kids would love in a science museum. The triplets' eyes went wide. Us? Really? Really? Every Saturday after we finish the treehouse, we can work on ideas for the museum. Claire watched this exchange with a soft smile. Just don't forget about the school science fair next month. Your solar system model isn't going to build itself. Speaking of school, Rebecca said, how did the parent-teacher conference go? Ms. Thompson said they're the best students in class, Claire reported proudly. And she thinks their latest building designs show real promise. Just like their dad, Rebecca smiled. And their mum, Elliot added quickly. Claire's the one who encouraged their creativity all these years. After dinner, as the boys showed Rebecca their latest treehouse improvements, Claire and Elliot sat on the porch steps sharing a quiet moment. I got another call from the publisher, Claire said. They want to change the book. Instead of just my story of raising the boys alone, they want to include the whole journey, including this part, how we're making it work. 2 parents separate but together, putting the children first. They think it could help other families. Elliot watched his sons laughing with their aunt. We are making it work, aren't we? We are. It's not conventional, but Claire smiled. When have we ever been conventional? Just then, Leo ran over. With their family calendar, Claire's organization system that now included all of Elliot's activities with the boys. Dad, don't forget, Leo said seriously. Tomorrow is Pancake Day, and after that, we're going to the Science Center to research for our museum project. I won't forget, Elliot promised. I'll never miss another Pancake Day. Later that night, after the boys were tucked in their beds, Elliot and Claire sat in the completed reading nook of the treehouse. The autumn air was crisp, and the stars were bright above them. I've been thinking, Claire said quietly, about what the boys said last week about wanting to hyphenate their last names. Claire, we don't have to. No, I want to. They should have your name too. They're so proud to be your sons. Elliot felt tears in his eyes. I'm the proud one. Every day I'm amazed by them, by how you raised them, by how you've let me be part of their lives now. You know, Claire said thoughtfully, 5 years ago when you left, I thought my heart was broken forever. But looking back, maybe we both needed that time. You needed to learn what really matters in life, and I needed to find my strength. And now we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Different people than we were back then. Better people. From the boys' bedroom window came the soft sound of their night. Light music. Still the same lullaby Claire had played for them as babies. I don't regret anything, Claire continued. Every decision, every struggle led to this moment. To our boys having both parents who love them more than anything in the world. Even if those parents aren't together? Elliot asked. Claire smiled. Even then. Maybe especially then. Because now we're choosing to be a family. Not because of romance or obligation, but because of love. Pure, simple love for our children. The next morning, as promised, Elliot arrived early for Pancake Day. The boys ran to greet him, still in their pajamas, their father's dimples showing in their excited smiles, as he helped them measure flour and crack eggs, as Claire brewed coffee and set the table. As the morning sun filled their kitchen with golden light, Elliot realized something profound. This was better than any fairy tale ending. This was real. This was family. And somewhere between the spilled maple syrup and the boys' cheerful chatter, between Claire's gentle corrections of their mixing technique and his own fumbling attempts to flip pancakes, Elliot Kensington, the man who once thought he had everything, finally understood what true wealth meant. It wasn't in his bank accounts or his company's stock price. It wasn't in fancy weddings or society pages. It was right here in this kitchen, with pancake batter on his shirt and 3 amazing boys calling him Dad. This was his happily ever after. Not the one he'd planned, but the one he was meant to have all along. Dad, Liam called, pulling him from his thoughts. You're burning the pancakes. And as the smoke alarm went off and the boys laughed, and Claire rushed to open windows, Elliot knew with absolute certainty that he wouldn't change a single thing about his perfectly imperfect life. After all, some love stories aren't about romance at all. They're about family, about second chances, and about the kind of love that grows stronger every day, one pancake breakfast at a time. The end.